to a World of Good podcast. My name is Andrew Gale, and I am grateful that you are joining us for this episode of A World of Good. So we're doing something different right now. If you've been watching, these next few podcasts are going to be a little bit different. I don't know whether you're watching or listening to these when they're coming out, but you may know we're in the midst of our Find Your Stride campaign. This is a great opportunity where we encourage connection and support of our global personnel, global strategy. So you can find out more about the Find Your Stride campaign at www.chogglobal.org/Find Your Stride, or I'll put it somewhere in the screen here that you can see and click on. Well, I don't know if you can click on it, but you can at least know how to spell it and go visit that and learn more about the campaign that's happening right now. Now, to celebrate this week, we've actually decided to release 3 podcasts in 1 week and to make them video podcasts. So if you're listening to this on one of our regular platforms, great, enjoy it. If you want a little bit of a different experience, you can head on over and watch these 3 special episodes on YouTube and our Facebook channels because they're video podcasts as well. A whole new world. I've not done this before. So it's fun. It means I have to look better than I normally do. I can't sit in my PJs and do podcasts. So today, Corey and Abby Stocksdale are joining me from Maun, Botswana. And I was actually doing a little bit of research. You guys actually kicked off our season 2 of A World of Good way back in the fall of 2020 when the world was still technically shut down. So this was like August of 2020. It was actually right after our first Find Your Stride campaign. And then 2 years later, we actually had your kids on season 6, and they shared kind of about the MK experience. And now another 2 years, and we're having you guys back. So I feel like maybe this is going to be like an every 2 years thing. I think we could make that work, make a little tradition. I don't know. So how are you doing?
Sounds like our kids will be up in 2 years' time then.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have to get them back.
Yes.
So how are you guys doing today?
We're doing well. We're recently back in Botswana. We were stateside for about 3 months from the end of February to early May. And so it's, it's always bittersweet to come back because we can't wait to get back to our home and our friends here, but it's never easy every single time. It's difficult. So
yeah, it's a huge transition, especially with 3 kids that are also transitioning. I mean, that would be a big transition for adults, much less these kids that have their lives in both places and family in one place. And just, I'm sure there's a lot of push and pull from both sides, and trying to navigate all of that emotionally is a lot.
For sure. We've done this 3 times now. And the last home assignment, I told myself, okay, I think no matter how many times we do this, there's always going to be a transition period, especially coming back, like both sides, there's a transition period, but like, especially coming back to Botswana, I'm like, we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace. And just having that mindset coming back into the field really helped, I think, this time, but also like getting back into our rhythms and routines with school, like that's actually been such a gift this time as well. Just a few days after we got back, their next term of school started, and so they were right back into it. And so it's gone pretty smooth, which we're grateful for.
That's awesome. You have pretty awesome kids, but still, for anyone, that's a huge transition. So we're grateful that it's gone well. So as we get started, tell us, you said you're back in Maun, Botswana. Tell us where that is for those that don't know. Act as if I'm a second grader in geography class and let me know. And then what's your community like? What's it like where you live?
So Botswana, the country of Botswana is in Southern Africa, right in the central. So just north of the country of South Africa. It's landlocked. It's primarily desert, a lot of it, though to the north of us is the largest inland delta in the world. And every year that delta floods out and every year it recedes. So it's quite an interesting environment. And so our community kind of really lives off of that delta because that delta draws in a ton of wildlife. And so our main source of economy is the safari tourism business. And so, that is a big part of living here. Like you kind of have to get to know how the tourism sector works, how safaris work, what the bush is like, all those things, which we've kind of come to love the African bush, and it's kind of become a part of us in many ways. But the community itself is, it feels sometimes like 2 different worlds wrapped up into one. You've got the Botswana community, so those who have always lived here, generations and generations and generations. And then you've got kind of the expat community, though some of the expats go back 4, 5, 6 generations as well. And so sometimes it feels like two completely different worlds wrapped into one. But everybody makes it work. It's a very, very peaceful place. It's at least according to some lists, is the safest country in all of Africa. And so like it's such a cool, wonderful place to raise kids. I mean, yeah, people would have no idea that have never been here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What do you like best about getting to serve globally? Like, what are some of the positive experiences or things about the ministry that you do?
There have been many positives to getting to do this. One, just to meet so many different people from so many different places around the world. Like I said, there's a large expat community. Plus, we have dove into the Botswana community, and so like it's just really cool uh, to get to know people who are so much different than ourselves, and get to know different ways of life, different ways of celebrating things, different ways of mourning things. It just I think those are the biggest blessings, is getting to be with people who don't think like, act like, or talk like us, and getting to be a part of really the world, in a small sense. To me, that's one of the biggest blessings, and doing ministry here, getting to getting to praise and worship the African way. You cannot beat that. So much dance and so much movement and joy and celebration. So those are kind of the things that come to my mind.
I think also our kids at school has been a huge gift. That's kind of unexpected for me. But just the fact that they're in this international school, they're going to school with kids from all around the world. So our kids' global perspective is really different than had we been in an American school system or just monocultural school system, even how it's really opens up horizons and makes you think broader. And it's really been a gift to our family, and an experiential hands-on type of learning as well. And so we've actually been really grateful for the education that our kids have received in a cross-cultural setting.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I'm sure there are so many different benefits to somebody having that kind of an experience that will just benefit them in the long term, in the future, of where they can, thrive because they have been exposed to so many different ways of seeing the world. What are some of the challenges that you guys experience in your current setup, in your current world?
A couple challenges, I guess, that I think of. One is like you don't have the same support system when you live away from your home country. And so even when you move to, a different town than what you grew up in, you still have a support system that you can access. And so that's I think always a challenge living cross culturally, at least for our experience. And then the other thing is just whatever culture you live in, it brings challenges. And I think for ours, it's like I was just telling someone this the other day, but it's the lack of efficiency. Like efficiency doesn't matter here. I mean, it's like not even on the scale of things that matter. And so like having to adjust to that. I mean, we've been here 6 years, and like still there's sometimes where systems of things just drive you crazy, or that there's no schedule for this or that, or you show up for an event and it starts an hour late. I mean, you just have to get your mind used to those things. And but it's kind of a battle on the hard days still, so.
I think we underestimate how ingrained some of those things are. Like efficiency is a great example. Like I just think we're just so surrounded by it that we don't even realize that that's just an expectation. And even after 6 years, like it's that you would still feel that tension. That just shows how deeply ingrained in our psyche, those kinds of things are.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, it's, whenever we came onto the field, our first 2 years was supposed to be language and culture learning, but the learning never stops, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing. Like, it's always good to be learning something new, but like, you're always the learner. And so, like, you're always on the outside, like, you're never quite in, because there's always something more that you have to learn, or that you don't understand. And so sometimes that can get really difficult because you're just like, oh, like, just when you think like you've got it, then there's a whole other level that you have to that you've unlocked and have to learn about.
Like a video game. The next you've now leveled up.
Exactly.
All new
Exactly.
challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, an open world video game, right? This keeps going.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. So in your work you do, you get a unique view of God because you're experiencing, people whose faith is shaped by their culture. And so, what is one place that you've seen God show up recently?
We got to be a part of a project back a few months ago. It was, just kind of a simple building project. We had a church partner with us, a church out of Kansas, and we got to build a church building in a small village about 30 minutes away. And they had a small building throughout their history, a very tiny building. I'm talking like 10 feet by 10 feet, and you got 30 plus people in there, and so just tiny. And so we got to build this building, and it always feels good to build things, right, that's why people loved putting infrastructure in, from mission projects for years and years, but sometimes that's not always a good thing, and so we could have a whole conversation about that for sure. But this time in particular, though, everything went really well, and we got this building built. We were excited, they were excited. We really see promise in that village. We have loved that village from day one. It's been one of those places that really grabbed at our hearts the moment we stepped in there, and so we were excited to be a part of something that was big. And but we went back to the States for a home assignment, and then we got word that they were going to host Easter in the village. And what that means is we have 5 churches that we work with, and so all 5 churches come together for a big Easter conference. And usually they do it here in Mound where we live, where it's a town of 85,000 people, and so for them to do it in a small village is very different. And but with that new building, they thought, oh, this would be great to celebrate what they've got there, and so they took the Easter conference out there, and it was amazing. I mean, tons of people camped. They had lots of services all weekend long. There were multiple people who came to know Christ that weekend and who were baptized the following weekend, and just so much fruit that came out of that project. And sometimes for me, even though it can be exciting, like I said, to build something, for me, a lot of times it feels like it's a building, it's not people. But out of that building has already come some really cool things. And so sometimes what I may diminish in my head, God's got a hold of that, man, and he's going to do something really cool.
That's cool. And what an honor for that church to get to do that. That could be really, especially in cultures where, and I know we've talked about this, but like honor, shame, and that kind of stuff, like that's a huge deal for that church to be able to host that as well. I feel like that could be a really, just a neat opportunity for them to serve and be hospitable. That's really, really cool. So you've been living interculturally, cross-culturally in Botswana. Um, so much of what you do is connected to the church. I'm sure you've been processing your faith in the midst of that. How has your faith grown or changed? How has your view of God grown or changed because of relationships or the ways that other people in Botswana or other people you come in contact with see God? Like, how has culture, challenged your views or shaped your views in the last 6 years?
So for me, it has kind of opened up my view to God as creator. Of course, we know in Genesis, in the beginning, God created like all these things. But when you actually step out of your passport country and you start traveling around the world, you really get to see the creativity of God through all the different people he created, through the culture, like how boring would it be if we were all the same culture? We're not. And so like you get to see all this beauty in the people that he created. Environment and nature is a whole other story for a different day because that's incredible as well. But specifically cross-cultural ministry, the people, like it has brought to light to me how creative our God is, and that by celebrating the diversity of what God created is in itself a form of worship. Being able to honor one another in our differences. Corey and I have been huge proponents of, Jesus prayed in John 17 in the Garden of Gethsemane before he dies for future believers. He prays that we would be unified. And so when we honor one another, even in our differences with believers, and really truly see each other as brothers and sisters in Christ and can appreciate one another's differences, is really a form of worship and celebrating Creator God.
I love that. Love that.
I completely agree with Abby. I mean, it's just really it's helped open up my faith in so many different ways through the people and through the way that other cultures interact with God. I think we kind of get pigeonholed, so to speak, in how we interact with God, and we realize that, man, like there are so many ways that we can encounter God and that we can see God, and one of the things here in Africa is that they see that spiritual level of life that we often forget, and the missing middle that some people call it, and I remember a quick story. One day I'm driving down the road with my language teacher, Ike, and he's like, and he sees some guy that's mentally disturbed in the middle of the road, and he tells me he used to be normal, and I said, "Oh, what happened?" And he says, "Oh, the guy was cursed. He had stole from his uncle, and his uncle cast a curse on him." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he said, and then he gets in a car and he gets in a car wreck. And I said, "Oh, he got in a car wreck, so he has brain damage." And Ike says, "No, he was cursed." And I said, "Okay, fine, but he's got brain damage." And he says, "Oh, but he was cursed." And and so we ended up laughing at the end of it because we were both coming from two different angles. But like sometimes, they may encounter God and see that spiritual forces are at work, and that God has a way of coming alongside of people in ways that we just don't, because we see things so scientifically. And so it's just really cool how my mind has opened up to other ways of seeing God and what's happening.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, and I think that's one of the places that the church. I guess I could speak really specifically about maybe um, our small group of the Church of God. We tend to miss some of the spiritualness of the world and the Holy Spirit and the power of that, because we live in such a scientific world, and not that there's anything wrong with that per se. That's a perspective, but we miss some of the other pieces that you can gain. And I love, Abby, what you were saying about unity as well. I think unity is a word we love to throw around in the church. We love to say, "Oh, we need to be unified," and diversity, unity within our diversity. But until you kind of put yourself outside of your community, your small community, I mean, even in the United States, you can do that, but putting yourself outside of your small community, unity and diversity is just a great idea until you actually have to put it in practice. Like that's when it becomes difficult and complicated and messy and uncomfortable. And that's when you start to really realize what it means to what sacrifice means in the midst of unity and diversity. And that means I'm not going to have everything the way I wanted it in order to be in a space where everyone feels like they can be there together. And yeah, it's just really, that's powerful. And that's something that you have even a better perspective than we could because of your experience there in Botswana. What do you wish people knew? Like, as you think about the work that you're doing, what do you wish people knew about, or maybe even what did you think the missionary life, the global serving globally would be like versus what it actually has been like? Like, I would love to know that thought.
Um, let me. I think I'll start with the first part of what I wish
Sure.
people knew. I wish people knew that, like, when you enter into a cross-cultural situation, you are not coming to like save anybody. Like you're not coming to be their savior. You're not coming to fix them. They don't need fixed. Sometimes they need assistance, but so do Americans. We all need assistance. Nobody needs to be fixed. And so, like, just learning, even and going through the process of learning, of like, not everybody needs everything we think they need. Um, one of the I was just talking to Abby earlier today. Like, one of the oldest people groups come from here in Botswana. It's the Sand Bushmen, And, they've kind of been thrown into society at this point. But like, if they were still living how they wanted to, because they wanted to keep living the old ways where nomadic, living in the desert off the land. I mean, I could never imagine, but like, there's nothing wrong with living that way. You know what I mean? They don't have to have electricity. They don't have to be forced into certain ways of living. And so, like, just entering into different cultures as a learner and not as someone who's trying to fix a culture is so very, very important. And I think that's what I would hope that people would learn to know.
I 100% agree with that. When I was thinking about this question, I kind of have trouble putting it into words, so I'll do the best that I can. But like a lot of times when we get to the States and we're talking to people, they'll be like, I could never do what you do, or, like that's too hard for me. I could never. Or you hear, the people, Lord, I am 100% in, send me anywhere but Africa, and, here's the people doing Africa. And I think like it is difficult, but you have to choose your heart in life, right? And when the Lord calls, like the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. And I am the least likely person who should be on the mission field. It should not be me, yet here I am.
I love it.
And so like I would just want to tell people, like, whatever the Lord is calling you to do in life, to be obedient to it, and he's going to be faithful to you through the process. And like, yes, it's hard, but also like it's not that bad, says the person who shouldn't be here to begin with, right? So like just want people to like kind of be able to dream about, foreign places or exotic places, and not see it as a threat or something unattainable or impossible, but be open to it, because there's so much to learn and experience.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for this time. I have one more question for you. Just how can we be praying for you and for your family in the coming weeks and months?
One way is this is kind of a year of goodbyes for us. We have a lot of goodbyes this year. Our colleagues who are also global strategy missionaries are leaving the field in just over a week. They'll be retiring, and so we'll be saying goodbye to them. We've got two different families who we're good friends with who are leaving in just a couple of months. Our daughter is in Standard 7, which is the last grade of primary here. And so they literally have a leavers dinner at the end of Standard 7 because so many kids will go. Most of them go off to boarding school. And so it's a year of goodbyes. And so we definitely ask for prayer for that. And so just a lot going on with that kind of stuff this year. But
yeah, that's hard. And it's hard. Transitions are hard anywhere, but especially when you're in a place, like you said, where you're away from family. And so you get very connected to those, I'm sure, that are in your vicinity, and because they become your family, they become your people. And so those goodbyes get even more complicated and difficult. So we will for sure be praying for you in that. And thanks so much for sharing that. And thanks so much for being with us, sharing your story. It's been so good to reconnect. Like 2 years from now, make sure your kids are ready. We'll do another podcast.
Working on our calendar.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for listening to A World of Good. A World of Good is a podcast production of Global Strategy and Church of God Ministries. Our theme song is Colorado by Leo Flores. If you want to join the conversation, visit us at Twitter at A World of Good Pod, on Instagram, A World of Good Podcast, or visit our website, chogglobal.org/A World of Good. And join us next time as we share more stories of good from around the world.